comparison to make, here. And in Paul Dewey, we have a greater optimism than we had in UWM. Again, we're just tripping through the similar questions where relevant. And this statement of I'm willing to have environmental problems resolved, even if this means sacrificing some of my personal lifestyle. What we've got here is there's a greater disagreement with this than in Wales in the French data set. Don't know where that's coming from or why, but these are issues that we might want to chew over and maybe consider. Again, this same one about whose responsibility should it be is that the French data set, well, it's pretty, again, it's not a normal distribution, but it is distributed more evenly, shall we say, than in UWN, who strongly, and Wales does tend to strongly disagree and take a global perspective on these issues. And this limited survey certainly seemed to support a greater global awareness. This is an interesting one because what I've been doing up till now is looking at perceptions of environment and environmental problems. Now what I'm trying to do is move into the realms of the role of science in this and how it's to be utilized embedded into the SDGC. Environmental problems should be left to experts, presumably experts that have a scientific basis. It's a bit worrying though, isn't it? Because some of the recent experts have been stuffing tires and golf balls down the whole of the ocean floor. So we have to think about what we mean by experts here, really. Science and technology can solve our environmental problems. Again, there's not much difference in that really. There's a fairly reasonable, a fairly similar response. Science and technology mainly benefit developed countries. Okay, very big difference here. The French data set agrees. There's a sort of indecision being apparent in the UWN data set. Science is a difficult subject to learn and doesn't interest me. Effectively, I'm not putting too much faith in this response. I don't think the sample size is big enough. But nevertheless, the question is interesting. And in Wales, this is a disagreement. There's nothing much coming out of the French data set. But many a time, students will turn around and find that if they were to choose, if they had an elective subject, they would walk away from the sciences because of the fact that they say it's too hard or they underestimate their own abilities to achieve it. This is almost contradictory to the previous one, though, and that's what I hope when I let you have these data sets for discussion, is that I think everybody should learn about science. This is strange. I don't know why this is happening, but there's a disagreement there, whereas there's, there's a typo in this. I just noticed it comes along. But there is a low disagreement here and an agreement that science should be studied in Wales, and that moves in the same direction with Paul Dewey. And then we go to science is important for environmental education, and that's pretty much an agreed response. So I'm going to flick past these ones for the time being so that we can get down to having some discussion about this. But just to follow this through, what is interesting in Wales and in France is the source for your information, the source of information for environmental issues. The source for information for environmental issues seems to be television first. Internet is quite low down here, and college and university at 25%. I suspect that might be something to do that some of my students filled in the form, and they were actually trying to say that they were getting it from college and university. But I wouldn't be one to be that cynical. I'm surprised that the internet wasn't higher in this response. Again, in France, what we have is that TV is the major source. Now, what I'm really thinking about here is, and there are many, many programs with a high level of integrity, but I'm wondering about if we go to the less respectable, if you like, data sources with newspapers and television, how much disinformation is possible. I didn't ask this question in Wales because we do have it embedded, but asking students in France, and this was really quite remarkable, that they said, no, it shouldn't be compulsory in every subject. So these are things that I really need to keep working on. So just as a sort of springboard to have a look at these data sets, my own feeling is that people are aware of socio-scientific issues, but frequently don't have the knowledge to underpin their origins or how to resolve these problems. And I do believe that many people underestimate their own capacity to cope with science and scientific issues and scientific disciplines. And I think that's one area that we should try and progress. Now, I'm not quite sure how we do this. We have 2, 4, 5, possibly 6. But maybe there's loads of handouts here, but maybe could I invite some thoughts on what I presented to you already, either about the principles underpinning ESDGC as an embedded part of education, or in any of the data sets which I can easily pull back for us on the screen if we wanted to do that.
That last slide you put up, was there any background information on why you felt so strongly it should be embedded? Because I thought it was quite interesting.
I find that interesting too, and it's one that I want to follow up. But I think what they want to do is, I think it's particularly part of the French psyche, is that they will do it by choice, they will not do it by imposition in terms of that. And there are many, trying to find the right word, students that are dislocated from this whole environmental question because it is this constant for the last 10, 15 years of being told that the sky is going to fall and it hasn't happened yet, and their own personal quality of life comes forward. And so it's a question of why should we have this in our subject? I want to be an engineer, I don't want to know about this, I want to do this. I suspect that's got something to do with it.
Well, how well does it work at home though? Being very pragmatic about it. You haven't sort of got a horizontal ESDGC coordinator sort of in HE, for example, or necessarily in schools. So how can you ensure that we sort of pupils, students are getting a spread of the issues, that just not every time everybody, you said climate change, everybody knows about climate change.
Yeah.
So in each subject they're getting climate change, and not the sort of spread.
Well, I think what we're looking at here is significant staff development for all educators, because there will be many a maths tutor or physics tutor approaching the end of their career who will not see how or who wish to incorporate these things these aspects into their teaching. It's very interesting because if you go to the other sector, for instance, and look at plumbers and hairdressers, they're going to say, how would we teach them? How would we include them? Well, of course, disposal of hair and disposal of waste. These are all elements, rather than just, this is the technique. We want to look at what the sustainable issues are and the citizenship issues are underpinning that. And it doesn't need to be to rarefy the point of view. It can be a very obvious point of view. But I do think that the significant issue is staff development, and it must come through the educators down.